Okay. Then with that done, we'll move on to the approval of minutes. We will need to approve both minutes from our September 26th regular meeting and October 24th joint workshop with the city council. And if I'm correct, that's got to be two separate motions, correct? Okay. And so I'll entertain a motion to approve the regular minutes from the September 26th, 2023 meeting.
I move to accept the minutes from September 26, 2023, regular business meeting for the Planning Commission.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, that passes unanimously. We'll move on to, I'll accept a motion for the workshop, the joint workshop with City Council that was held on October 24th, 2023.
Oh, sorry. I make a motion that we accept the minutes for October 24th, 2023, the joint workshop.
A second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 All right, that passes unanimously. We'll move on. The next on our agenda is public comment. During this time, citizens may comment on subjects of interest not on the agenda or agenda items. To ensure comments are recorded properly, state your name clearly. Individual comments will be limited to 3 minutes to ensure maximum participation during the 15-minute time frame allotted for this item. Public comment may also be submitted online at www.oakharbor.gov/public comment, at least 2 business days in advance of an advisory board meeting. So do we have any comments from the public here today? Okay, seeing none, we had none that were received previously, correct? All right, we will close public comment then and move on to the public hearing. During the scheduled public hearing, interested parties will be given the opportunity to provide testimony or offer comments as applicable. To ensure comments are recorded properly, state your name clearly. Please limit comments to 3 minutes. And at the moment, we have none scheduled. So we'll move on to the discussion action presentation, correct? So we'll start with the Planning Commission Bylaws and Ordinance, and that will be presented by Sabrina Combs, our Executive Services Administrator. Hi, Sabrina.
Thank you for catching my title change. We didn't update the PowerPoint. Okay, so updates, boards, commissions, and committees. So just for some background to provide to you, we implemented some standardized templates for meeting agendas, meeting minutes, video recordings to make things more transparent to the public. That you saw on your agenda tonight. It's just a standardized template so that everybody's seeing the same thing. It's easier for staff. It's also easier for the public to find things. We then drafted the initial revisions from the advisory board feedback and then reviewed draft versions with the city clerk, finance director, and city attorney before presenting tonight. So the city has 2 types of advisory boards. We have internal advisory boards that focus more on internal issues in the city, and then external advisory boards that are public-facing. The internal advisory boards are things like the Civil Service Commission, Community Police Board, and these other ones that are listed here. And then our external advisory boards are this group, as well as Arts Commission, Historic Preservation Commission, LTAC, Marina Advisory, Park Board, and so those are the ones that we're referring to as external. So what we're doing is focusing on those external committees. So what we've done is we are going to, in tonight's presentation, review with you the uniform code, talk to you about your comments and feedback, then we'll go through the ordinance specific to the Planning Commission, again, pause for comments and feedback, and then review the bylaw changes and pause for your comments and feedback, and then we're taking back those edits to council on December 5th. So the first thing is repealing Oak Harbor Municipal Code, Chapter 265. So we're calling it a repeal because we did so many edits to that uniform code that it's just easier to replace it. So that is what we're doing. You have a copy of those, I believe, in your packet. So you will see some of the changes that we have there. And then we're going to adopt a new Chapter 265 titled Uniform Policies for Boards, Commissions, and Committees. So the changes are to membership and residency requirements. We're just making sure that we have diversity in our boards. And we use diversity in the sense of different people representing from different groups. Then we're staggering the terms for expiration dates to make that more consistent and clear. So position 1 expires in the odd years, and then position 2, which is an even number, expires in the even years. We are going with 2-year terms, and then a maximum of terms that you can serve. And of course, there is a caveat for that, so that if we need to extend something, we have a project going on or something with that individual, we can take that to council. We're also realigning the terms to the calendar year, January through December, so that it's clearer, and then steps for addressing annual bylaw updates, meeting calendars, training officer elections, attendance policies, member resignations, and filling vacancies. And that's because we've had instances where somebody resigns, the date gets changed, so we're just making sure that everything is clear and that you have something to reference as well that's easy to understand, and then giving the steps for how you go about those processes. So with that, do you have any questions on this uniform policies? And I have Kim Perrine here to take notes, so.
Any questions from the, yes, Commissioner?
Can't, thank you again. I don't know where I read it, it's in here, that you had to be a resident to be on these commissions. And then later on, I saw a place where it mentioned business owners. So are we sure that we know that that's set correctly now?
So different committees have different makeups of their board. One of the things that became a consistency from council is moving, some of the committees were 5 and we moved them to 7. So they're all at 7. Several of the advisory boards have come back to us and said, hey, can we make a change to this? So for instance, one of the committees started talking about, hey, when we talk about residents, can we maybe change that to say people who live in the zip codes for 98277 and the zip code that includes the base, so that we have more folks from the military community that can participate. We are using the term resident specifically to be more inclusive, because we found that when you say citizen, some people feel like they can't participate in government. So when it comes to the business members, I'll let Kim's checking. Okay, so we think that we took that out, so if you have a section, let us know. Okay, yeah.
I think I saw one place where it still exists. I'll look for it.
Yeah, just let us know, because we're trying to catch all this stuff, so we appreciate the help. Any other questions?
Yes, Commissioner Chazo.
I saw that for vacancies, you're to contact people who have expressed interest first to let them know there's a vacancy. I think I saw that in the ordinance or the bylaws. Is there a mechanism for you to keep track of people who express interest, and what does the definition of express interest? Is that written interest, or someone you see at a meeting and says, I'd love to be on this commission, and you're supposed to make sure you make notation of that?
So usually what we've done is people have submitted something either in writing, or they filled out a form through our website, or they filled out an application, and maybe there wasn't a position to fill at the time. So we're going back to those people. We do have a process with the mayor's office with the city clerk and executive assistant to the city administrator, where we go through that process, and now we're including our records management team. So we have a process for looking at those. And that honestly is a really good question, because one of the concerns I brought up to council is our current terms with resignations and changes has led to where we have an 85-page document that we're trying to keep track of people. So that's why we're trying to streamline this.
Commissioner Gould?
Okay, it's under proof of residency, and it mentions providing a copy of their utility bill and/or proof of business ownership.
Oh, maybe that's just a revision. Okay, we'll make a note of that. Thank you.
Does that mean it's going to go away?
I think we just need to look at it and see where that crosses with some of the other edits we've done. So
Okay.
I need to confirm that. That's just something that off the top of my head.
Well, the reason I say that is I actually have a problem with somebody being on a commission who does not live right here.
And that is a fair statement. One of the reasons we made some of these changes was because we have had instances in the past where somebody was, say, a business owner and didn't have an active involvement in the community or aware of some of the things that were going on in the community. So we were trying to address that. So I say confirm that, because I think we are making a consistent change to remove the business requirement, but I need to double check that. I don't want to state that incorrectly.
Okay.
Sorry, when you're modifying 7 groups, it starts to get a little fishy.
Any other questions? I have a couple, Sabrina.
Sure.
So, the bylaws, we've been working on these for some time. What is the thought process behind the full repeal and replacement of the ordinance at this specific point in time? When specifically, I'm wondering if this is the right time to do it, since we do have a new administration coming in about a month.
So the honest answer there is we've been working on it for several months. It takes a lot of time to go through these documents, review them, go back to the groups, look at those edits, find consistencies, take them through our legal representation. So it's just been a timely process to do it. The other thing is that we're trying to create consistency and straighten out some of those items. And when a new mayor starts and our council is sitting, usually at the beginning of the year, they talk about who's going to be a part of which groups. And so having this organized will allow us to make those decisions better. So we were just trying to get prepared for the new year. It wasn't so much about who the mayor was at the time as organizing our documents and making sure things were standardized and making sure that it was more efficient for staff to reference.
Okay. So if this gets ratified before the new mayor takes office, or before the new council takes office, what are their options if they disagree with certain parts that are in here? Again, not the bylaws, but the ordinance is where I'm concerned, because it seems like it does strip quite a bit of authority from the mayor that he's previously, or she has previously had.
I don't recall that we stripped a lot of authority. Most of it was copied. A lot of the stuff that we fixed or modified was the things relating to the specific groups and the way that we process these things so that it was more documented. And the reason we're doing a repeal is, as I said, we're just trying to make sure that there's so many edits that we just replace the document. But if council wanted to make changes or the mayor wanted to make changes, they could request that staff take those steps and we bring it back to council. So that is their option.
So specifically, like looking at, say, the term limit, right?
Right.
I'm a little confused as to the necessity of a term limit for a non-paid volunteer position, because if the mayor doesn't want somebody to be there for whatever reason, they just wouldn't approve an appointment when the term comes up. Wouldn't that be what would happen?
They could do that, but a couple of the things we tried to address is just make sure we had the systems and instructions in place for the different advisory boards. So we were trying to make sure that the process was clear. And again, with this one, we added the caveat so that there is an option to extend people. And we did hear that from the Marina Advisory Group. They were talking about, what if we're working on a really big project and we want to continue working on that? Then we provided an option to extend those people. But we also heard from council, which is a very valid point, that with some of our terms being 4 years currently, it's a very long time that you're asking somebody to serve. And as a volunteer position, it would be nice to give them the opportunity to say, okay, I've served my 2 years, I want to go try another board, or I want to do something else. So we were trying to address that in some of these revisions.
I can appreciate that, but I'm not fully aligning with council's vision, because if somebody wants to go to try a different position, a term limit doesn't help that. And we don't have term limits on our city council. So to put term limits on a volunteer position when we don't have term limits on our elected officials, it seems to be a bit much.
Yeah, I think we were just trying to make sure that we were providing the methods and tools to allow us to assist those who are serving, as well as the staff managing those groups. So it was one of the things, we looked at other groups and saw some of the things that were done. So it was just a revision for that purpose.
Did you have a question?
Did city council ask for term limits?
No, it wasn't. It was something that we did in some of the review that we were starting. What they did bring up was the specific of reducing the time for the term, so going from 4 years to 2 years. And they had seen these original draft documents.
My only concern is that Chairman Wassinger was a pretty big asset for this commission, and he would have been subject to this term limit of 6 years, wouldn't he have?
Well, and again, there's a caveat so that if we want to extend them, we can. Council has the authority to approve that.
Okay. The only reason I want to caution concern on that, because there can be bias involved in that too, where one person doesn't get extended where someone else does. And that's, I agree with Andy. I believe that it's a voluntary organization. And if the mayor decides he doesn't want Andy or I on this commission anymore, he just doesn't renew our commission. You're opening yourselves up to some bias. And so, just FYI, I mean, we've had some pretty good people on this commission that have served longer than 6 years, so it's a concern and a suggestion, I guess.
Okay,
Thank
well, I
you.
appreciate that, and we'll make a note of that.
How about we actually make a recommendation to that effect? Because I fully agree with both of you. Okay.
Did you have a?
I think I might be in disagreement with you guys a little bit, and maybe this is not the point in your presentation where we would have discussion, but I like the idea of term limits. I like the idea of turnover, right? I think that while true that like someone who's been here for a long time and knows those processes, I think that it's important that there's opportunity for new people with new ideas to, take that entrenched kind of structure that we have now and shake it up a little bit, right? I think that that is one of the best ways that we can kind of see ideas manifest and try to guide to a better future. That's a little bit philosophical, but I think that there's something to be said about having the ability for turnover and new people to come in, and like staff is saying with, if there are caveats and long projects that need that consistency, but otherwise I think that it's helpful to have that mechanism in place to kind of encourage more participation by more and various types of people. That's not really a question for you, but.
No, it's a fair discussion point. We've had a lot of back and forth. We've looked at other groups. So again, this is based on different findings that we've had and feedback we've received, so.
I wanted a couple more questions here on this. The dissolving of a board or commission rests with the city council. Is there a process in place for that? How do we ensure that we're not dissolving a board or council or commission prematurely or for political or personal reasons that might ultimately hurt the community?
That is a tough question. So we tried to cover most of these items in here. I don't think we have anything covering dissolution of a group or an advisory body, but Kim's doing a quick search too.
So could that be a place where we do a two-party? To me, that seems like that should be something where the council votes on it and the mayor has veto power over it, or the mayor approves it and the council has veto power. It seems to me that if we're going to completely dissolve a board or commission and say, we don't need that anymore, that it shouldn't rest with just one of the two branches in the city.
No, it's an excellent point, and we will make a note of it as something to add, because one of the points of doing this was trying to document for everybody what those processes were.
Did you have?
Yeah, just along the same lines, just another suggestion along those. I mean, the council is the governing body of this city, and so you really don't want three council members getting together and dissolving an important committee. Another suggestion would be either a supermajority or a two-thirds requirement. Okay. I'm not sure what the legality of that is in our ordinances, but at least making it so that just three people can't get together and dissolve a committee. That's all. That would be a suggestion, that just to make sure. I don't think any of this is an issue. So, it's a protection in the future.
No, and we appreciate that. We tried to think of all the things like resignation process and things that we've seen that haven't worked. So this is a great point that you're bringing up, that we will look at how we can add that.
I think the last question I had deals with kind of the authority of a commission to self-govern. I noticed there's, for example, the attendance policy, the student appointment, which I'm glad that that's in there. I know that I think I've said that to a few people that I thought we should have that, so that's wonderful. And membership appointment. I'd like to see some of that authority be given to the commission or board that is going to be bringing those individuals on. The same and it looks like there's maybe some mechanism in here for that. But even with that, I have concern that it says that those conversations, if they take place with the commission or board, that it's to be done publicly and open. But we don't do that with our appointed city council members. We go into executive session to have those discussions. So again, I feel like we're holding appointed volunteers to a higher standard than we're holding elected officials.
And are you specifically talking about attendance, or just so I understand the specifics that you're focused on?
What I'm saying is I think it would be beneficial to take the attendance and those type of authorities and put them with the authority to vote a member onto the board or commission and give that authority to a specific board or commission and have them work with the mayor and make that recommendation. But what concerns me about doing that is when I read through this and it talks about the board or commission discussing an appointment, it says it's to be done publicly in a public meeting. But we don't do that for our city council appointees, elected officials that are paid. We go to executive session and have those discussions. So it's kind of a two-part thing. I think that power should rest with a board or commission, and they should be able to report that, what they would like or what they plan to do to the city council and to the mayor. But I don't think they should be held to a standard higher than our elected officials.
Okay. So currently what happens, from my understanding, is that the city clerk receives those applications. She reviews them to make sure that they meet the requirements for that position or that advisory body, because it depends on what they have as specific requirements, as we're talking about. And then from there, it goes into the mayor's office, where we have a conversation about, here are the people who met the requirements, here's some people who may not have. These people might work well for another board or commission because they talked about other ones they're interested in. And then from there, we go through the process of selecting those individuals. What you're saying, just so I make sure I'm capturing it right, is you'd like there to be an added process where it comes before your group to look at and talk about who would be the selected person to move forward. But you'd want to do that not in a public meeting, but potentially in some sort of executive session.
So in the ordinance, it says there's a mechanism by which an appointee is interviewed and voted on by the commission, board or commission. I think that's great. In there, it says that will be done in a public meeting. I think that's also great,
Right.
right? But I think it's holding the commission to a higher standard than it holds our city council, because when our city council discusses an appointee, they go into executive session.
And then they come out and do the
And then
vote.
they come out and do a vote. And so my personal view is that all of those should be public. There should be no executive session for an appointment to anything, especially an elected official.
Okay.
But if we are going to keep executive session, then we shouldn't hold our boards and commissions to a higher standard.
Okay, so we will confirm with our city attorney what we can and can't do, just because we want to make sure that we're meeting OPMA requirements and other things. But we will also note that as a recommendation. And then just for the attendance piece, just so you know, that we added a mechanism for that just because our thought process was, we've had instances where a board member has fallen off the radar, they haven't been showing up to meetings, and we're like, are they coming, are they not coming? So we wanted to make sure there was a tool in which we could engage with that individual and have a conversation and make sure that the board was aware that we were attempting to address that, so you didn't have a quorum issue.
And I think it's a great requirement. I think that the board chair or vice chair or combination thereof should have some authority and responsibility to the mayor to say, I have spoken with this commission member.
Okay.
They are not showing up. I would like to remove them from the commission. And then the mayor come in, as opposed to, because the way it reads and the way the bylaws read to me, the board chair or the commission chair really has no control over the panel or board that they're being asked to chair.
Okay.
And I think that that should be a meeting with the mayor, and that person should have the authority to say, this person is not living up to those standards. I want to start the removal process. And I know it's kind of convoluted, my thoughts weren't all put together, but literally what I was looking at was, once that process is done, you've got an empty spot. And that board chair and board vice chair should be involved in reviewing those packets of those that may fill it, and then taking that to the commission and saying, these are the potentials for our commission, and then have that discussion, have that vote, and then that vote go to the mayor, and if the mayor approves it, it goes to city council to be ratified.
Okay, we'll make notes of that, and just, you're okay, just so I'm clear on this, you're okay if we do that initial process where we receive the applications, make sure you're getting the packet of the people who meet the standards?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I just wanted to confirm.
In this same thing,
Yes, I believe so.
And I think we've captured that, so yeah, we're just trying to make sure we're getting everything. Thank you.
Commissioner Shaver? Oh,
And I was going to say, it's not working the way you said right this minute.
Oh, correct.
I mean, I was interviewed, not by you guys, I was interviewed by Mr. Cool. And as far as I knew, it went straight to the mayor from there.
Different groups have had different processes, and that's why we're trying to standardize and document
Okay.
the way in which we're doing it. You're explaining exactly what we're trying to make sure, because the other concern that we had as staff is, with some of the staff changes we've had, employee X was the one who did that, their process was known, they did it this way, and we didn't have it documented. The committee was wondering if we were still doing it the same way, well, we didn't have a document. This is making sure that we all know what we're doing as the process. So that's why we appreciate the feedback. It's helping us.
Commissioner Shaver?
I see all the committees, there's the possible ex officio, one ex officio city council member.
Correct.
Have we ever considered having an ex officio, somebody who doesn't live in the city limits but is a part of, obviously subject to the mayor's approval and appointment, someone who lives in the county or not even in the county, but let's say we need 5,000 more homes in the next 20 years. And let's say like Lexar comes in or somebody, a huge corporation comes in. Having an ex officio on this board, non-voting, but at least as a subject matter expert to provide, because right now we rely only on our knowledge and staff's knowledge and staff's presentation, but to have an ex officio on this committee, on this planning commission, that gives us information from the builder side. Have we ever considered having an ex officio, somebody from that side, that gives the flexibility to the mayor to appoint somebody to this commission or any of the commissions that can provide insight from the other side of the fence?
So
Not
are you
just from the
thinking
center.
that in the ex officio role where we have council member that maybe we add some language about, or subject matter expert in
And/or-
instances required
and/or
or something like that?
Yeah, because, I have no idea where Mr. Massey lives, okay? He may live in the county for all I know, but it'd be nice to have Mr. Massey here sitting in front of us, okay, and saying, okay, yeah, this is what the impact of this ordinance is gonna be on the builder versus hearing it just from the city's protection standpoint versus what the impact is to builders. So, I mean, it'd be nice to have the subject matter expert here versus just having to rely on testimony and no one shows up. So,
Okay.
just curious, that's all. I mean, I don't know if you've ever given that, and same thing on LTAC. I mean, LTAC, usually we put people on LTAC, because LTAC's not subject to city limits, is it, on the commission?
LTAC is about those who receive the money and those who are giving the money, so it's a different makeup.
Right.
And so it's a little bit different, and we even talked about that with the Marina Advisory Committee, because some of those people are actually customers, so when we talked about conflict of interest, that's a little bit different. It would be if that individual actually started working for a company that we were doing a contract with, then we'd have a problem.
No problem.
Yeah, so
That's my 2 cents.
we will add that notation.
Any
Okay.
other comments or, okay. One thing I noticed, and I haven't found, I've been scrolling trying to find it. There is one spot in here, and if I find it, I'll email you or send you, where it looks like maybe it was an old revision, but it reverts to gendered language, and I know the city's trying to move away from that. So there's a spot where it says, I believe it says, "He will report."
Okay, we'll do a search. Yeah,
So,
thank you.
I'm trying to scroll here, I'm not finding it, it's not, but I know that that's something that you've been wanting to work on, so.
Yeah, we've been trying to clean those up, so we appreciate that.
But if there's no other questions from the commission, Sabrina, thank you for your time and for answering all of our questions and the wonderful presentation.
Perfect, thank you.
All right, next on the agenda is the flood damage prevention, and this will be presented by Mr. Dennis Weaver.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Chair, Planning Commissioners. My name is Dennis Lefebvre. I'm Senior Planner with the City of Oak Harbor. And this is your second opportunity to basically discuss and review this proposed flood damage prevention ordinance amendment that we are moving through. I do have a PowerPoint, which I will pull up here. and I assume you can all see that. As I mentioned, this is your second opportunity to actually review the code that we're looking at. A little background initially here, and I mentioned this back at the September meeting that we had to discuss the initial steps on this process. Most of the changes that we are reflecting as part of this code amendment have been either recommended or are mandatory changes that came through a meeting with the Washington Department of Ecology folks to reflect some of the changes in not only the state law regarding floodplain prevention, the federal level as well through the Federal Emergency Management Agency. So those changes are basically what we took from that discussion and their input and made the additions and deletions in our code, which hasn't really been updated since 2017. And I think the primary effort back in 2017 was to reflect the biological opinion that the National Marine Fisheries Service issued on FEMA at that time, which we're also addressing as part of our code. So what you haven't seen is what the proposed changes are. That's attachment 1 in your packet. I have actually 2 versions. One is the actual visual red line version with additions being underlined in red text and deletions being strike-throughs in red text as well. In years past, some of the planning commissioners like to see a version that incorporated all the changes so it was more of a clean read. So I've also included a clean draft as attachment 2. As I mentioned last meeting back in September, we had a consultant, Pertite, working on what is called a citywide habitat assessment. And the primary focus of that assessment was to address that biological opinion, which I also explained a couple months ago, that was issued by the National Marine Fisheries Service for all communities basically influenced by the Puget Sound watershed, which is Oak Harbor, to address the Endangered Species Act issues for all projects within floodplains. Not a small task, especially when you consider the cost on some of the new projects and the habitat assessments that had to have been prepared for development within the floodplain. We do have completed now a habitat assessment citywide, which was completed for a couple of different reasons. One was to ensure that past projects which did not prepare a habitat assessment is in conformance with the requirements that we have in place now to do such. It will create a tool for future development within the floodplain to actually make development less expensive since they won't have to do a habitat assessment. And this assessment, along with the proposed changes that we are making to this code, potentially has the ability to lower the annual flood insurance premiums for development within the floodplain. So that's a benefit to all the projects that we are looking at, or potentially looking at redevelopment projects, basically any type of development within the floodplain. This is habitat assessment I did include as attachment 3. Recent completion was last month. It's a good document. It really gives you an opportunity to see what a habitat assessment is how it's structured. And it not only, like I mentioned, deals with projects that needed the habitat assessment that have been moved through the process already, but it also will help with future known and unknown projects. I also would like to note that I appreciate the effort that some of you planning commissioners have already made on review of both the strike-through underlined version of the ordinance as well as the citywide habitat assessment. Some of those potential revisions I have received and will incorporate in future drafts and make sure that both the ordinance and the assessment reflect those proposed changes. The other important piece that we're looking at, when we haven't fully researched this, I have been in contact with Department of Ecology representatives who actually operate the community rating system, but it is a FEMA program, and as I mentioned, if you have all of these pieces in place, it has the potential to reduce the annual flood insurance premiums. Now, the rating system, I'm not fully vetted on. I haven't researched that completely, but I think it's a rating system where it's based on the model ordinance that you have in place, as well as the quality of the habitat assessment. So that I'll bring back more information at a later meeting so that we can discuss that in more detail. But it certainly seems like a viable program for the city to at least research and see what type of benefits it could be for development within the floodplain, as well as looking at what type of administration issues will be involved in this system as well. The CRS more than likely would be administered by our Oak Harbor Building Department, and Ginger Pennington is the building official. Some of the next steps for this project, the next couple of months, we'll be doing the SEPA checklist, which is a requirement. We will actually prepare the ordinance document. We will be taking it to the city council in January. It has not been reviewed by the city council, so we'll take it to the workshop in January and then bring back their comments and also some of the clean drafts that we have in the ordinance and any other documentation that we have pulled together for a potential public hearing with the Planning Commission in February. And then we're going to tee it up for a March City Council public hearing and potential adoption of this ordinance. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Dennis. Any questions from the commission? Commissioner Chazar?
Dennis, thank you so much. Unfortunately, I have too much experience with rating systems after living in a hurricane-prone area. I do have a question about, on page 15 of the document, and it says something along the lines that they have to, in areas that are not planned out ahead of time, and the builder has to provide documentation, pictures, and all kinds of stuff. And I lost my document, so I'll find it in a minute. But
Is that the habitat assessment document or
the actual floodplain management document?
Oh, okay.
The ordinance document. It's on page 15. I don't have the actual, but it's on page 15. It talks about that, thank you. No, it doesn't look like this. You know what, you're in the fully thing. Anyway, it talks about having to build 2 feet above the threshold. And then, let's see, where am I at here? I'll quote it to you in just a second. It talks about building 2 feet above the threshold, and I have it in here somewhere. Anyway, yeah, it's item number 6, where elevation data is not available either through flood insurance study or other authoritative sources. It talks about historic data, so on and so forth. And it says, failure to elevate habitable buildings at least 2 feet above the highest adjacent grade in these zones may result in higher insurance rates. The first, just a semantic thing. Do we really want to put something subjective in an ordinance that says it may result in higher insurance rates? I'm not sure if that's necessary in an ordinance to put something like that in there. But the question I have for you is, that talks about 2 feet above. But then later on in the document, and I may know the answer to this, but you can help me out. On page 21, 17.20.210, 1.A.II. It talks about, it states that you have to build 1 foot above the 1 foot above the elevation. So why is one say you have to build 2 feet above and one says you have to build 1 foot above.
Well, Commissioner, that's an excellent question, and I certainly hope our building official is present this evening so she can answer that one.
She's,
If not, if she isn't present, I would certainly like to take some time and research that answer for you and then get back to, oh, there's Ginger. Okay.
Ginger's here, yes.
Okay, so one is talking about the highest adjacent grade, not necessarily the flood level,
Okay,
and the other one's reflecting the flood elevation.
okay.
So that's the difference. Probably would need to talk to ecology to find out more of what they're talking about, but
Got it.
it kind of makes sense, because if you're down below that area,
Gotcha.
then there's going to be water coming down,
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay.
typically.
Gotcha. Okay. That's all I have.
Thank you, Ginger.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from the commission? Thank you, Dennis. I had just a question about the habitat assessment. How long is it good for?
That's a good question. I don't have an answer for that either, but I will certainly investigate that with our Department of Ecology reps and FEMA for that matter.
Looks like Ginger might.
We talked
Yeah.
to FEMA and ecology, and there's not a time distance on this. There's not a sunset clause that they had. So until they propose a sunset clause, it's good.
So theoretically, then, if we're talking about insurance, we've just completed this habitat assessment. We're gonna build some new property. Say, for example, with the Sustainable Fisheries Act, the bullfish, goes from being, I think they're threatened right now, to being endangered, and, if this document is 10 or 15 years old, would we find ourselves in a situation where the insurance company says you're uninsurable until you do an individual assessment, even though the city's done the citywide?
I don't know why we wouldn't just, if they wanted us to change the assessment, why wouldn't we have them change the whole assessment? So again, it's good, instead of doing each individual. I mean, we did this to save the citizens money. Why
So-
wouldn't we continue in that realm?
Would it just be a simple update to that, or
Yeah.
would they have to do a whole new assessment of the environment?
You should just have to do an update on the parts that's changed. So it shouldn't have to be the whole thing again. I mean, unless we had a catastrophic thing that came and changed the climate of everything, I can't see that happening.
Okay. So this one is done, so unless we have some major catastrophic environmental catastrophe that changes our environment here, this document should be good for
Well,
what we need.
that's according to ecology and FEMA. They don't have a sunset clause. Again, if they decide to change the rules and they put a sunset clause in, then we'd have to address it, and then it would be a form of just updating it.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, Commissioner.
So, the livestock sanctuary areas, I'm talking about the part that's in yellow, not sure if it's needed within the city. There are several areas near the city, what do we call that area? The urban growth area, that should we decide to annex it, would need it. So, would this automatically work on those, or, I mean, you understand what I mean?
Would it expand, are you asking if this plan would expand to newly annexed, is that?
Yes, which would mean they'd have to create a sanctuary area.
Well, this would only be effective for those structures that are within the 100-year floodplain.
Oh,
And I don't believe we have a lot of floodplain outside the city limits within the urban growth area.
what about down toward North Beach?
If there was
Beach Road, West Beach Road?
some livestock being kept there, that, you know, this would be effective for that.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments? All right, well, thank you, Mr. Lefevre, for your presentation and for answering our questions today.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Next on the agenda is the CUP code amendment, and that will be presented by Mr. Ray Lindenberg, our city senior planner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, or the commission rather. I'm going to make this pretty brief. I gave you the information I hope you need to kind of give any comments or concerns that you might have with this, but essentially what's going on here is our ordinance is kind of out of line with some of the other ordinances of peer cities that we've reviewed in the past. You might not be familiar, but I'll just kind of explain. I've chosen a list of 10 or 12 cities of similar population within the state of Washington, kind of different type cities, suburban, rural, et cetera, but just kind of an idea of what other cities of our size are doing. And in this situation, our code requires that for a conditional use permit, if that property or business is sold to a new owner, a conditional use permit has to be reapplied for and approved in order to continue that use. We found that out of the 12 peer cities, none of them had that requirement. Many didn't have it addressed at all in the code, but some of them specifically said that that was not a requirement and that the conditional use permit, quote unquote, runs with the land. Essentially saying that if you get a conditional use permit, that goes with the property and not the person who applied for it. From my point of view and from the point of view of staff here, that's the way it should be. Requiring businesses to go through a second conditional use after they may have been operating for many years without any issues at all seems to be kind of too much of a requirement for them and going through time and effort for a business that probably shouldn't have to happen. We had a couple of them come up recently, one for an existing structure that is a senior living facility, has been operating for many years, many decades without any issues, and the other was for a daycare, same thing, constructed building specifically for that use, has been operating for many years without any issues. So we felt that it was a good idea to go back through and make that change to the code. It's a fairly minor change, but we think it will actually help, streamline the process for potential business owners and existing business owners in the community. So it's something we feel is pretty important. So I'm going to put the wording up on the screen real quick for you and go over that really quickly so we can discuss if you need to. Essentially what you have are two different sections of the code that are being addressed here. The first one is 1967-040. We're striking out one sentence there and replacing it with a new one. The old sentence says that conditional use shall not be transferable to a subsequent user unless specifically authorized by a hearing examiner, and has the requirement to go through a whole new hearing examiner process with a public hearing and everything that goes along with that. And the new sentence would read, a granted conditional use permit may continue as long as all conditions of issuance are met, irrespective of the ownership of the property, business, service, use, or structure, which was the subject of the conditional use permit, unless a specific expiration date is listed. And so what that does, it makes it so that if an existing business that had a conditional use permit is sold to a new owner, as long as that business is operating under the conditions of approval for the original conditional use permit, it can continue, unless there is a specific expiration date. So we still leave that possibility in there. If the hearing examiner at the time feels that that is something that is important, we can leave that in there. And then the second portion that we have changed essentially or added in here is kind of it follows along with what our non-conforming uses have. So essentially what it's saying is a conditional use that ceases occupancy or active use at the approved property for a continuous period of 1 year shall not thereafter be permitted to continue at said location. And that language is kind of taken from our non-conforming uses. If you have a non-conforming use that has been in operation and then ceases operation or ceases existence for more than a year, then that conditional use cannot continue. And so what we're saying there is conditional uses, we want to eventually go away. In this situation, we're saying that if it's no longer operating for more than a year, then it should probably be re-reviewed in case there are any issues that come up. So that was something we wanted to add in there as well. Those are essentially the two main criteria. That's really the only changes that we have as far as language is concerned on there. So we wanted to present it to the Planning Commission for any comments or concerns you might have. And we're going to hope to move forward with a hearing next time around and get this in front of the City Council, hopefully for approval early next year. So if you have any questions, I'm here to address those, and let me know what you think about it.
Any questions from the commission? All right, well, thank you, Mr. Lindberg. One question about the continuous use. Would there be any protection of that continuous use permit or conditional use permit for, say, I'm thinking like maybe somebody is redoing their building, a living care facility, for example, and behind an old wall they find asbestos or something that has to be remediated, and that greatly extends their timeline. If their intention is to open back up as, say, a long-term care or wherever they have that permit, is there a mechanism by which they can go past that year?
I would say that in that situation, we can be a little bit flexible from that. It doesn't specifically say in the code section. I think that would be a fairly rare distinction, but certainly possible. I'm glad you brought it up. When we look at the wording that says ceases occupancy or active use, I think that the interpretation there could be that active use is including, any renovation or work that's being done to further that use, right? So if they're doing some sort of remodeling and like you said, find something that is a surprise, essentially, I think that goes along with, the active use of that property. I think that's something that we could interpret that it could continue.
Thank you for that. If there are no other questions, thank you, Mr. Lindberg, for your presentation and for answering our questions.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is the subdivision text amendment, and this will be presented by Mr. David Poole, our director.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Tonight, Ray Lindenberg and I have been trying to clean up our code. And so the continuing series here is to clean up the subdivision section of our code. And we have to go through the same process regardless if it's a big text amendment like the floodplain or a small one with just some cleanups like this. So what this is Title 21 that controls the subdivision code sections that we deal with in the Oak Harbor Municipal Code. There's 3 provisions I'd like to talk to you about tonight in Section 21 that we need to update. These are all relating to engineering. The first one is Section 2130.0203G. That's where we would like to have the engineering department have the ability to collect a deposit for engineering services. And this would be done as part of a submittal. After you go through a preliminary plat, you come back with your more detailed drawings that are engineered, and the city engineer would make that determination. What happens here is we'll reimburse the city's actual cost to review the actual documents. So we don't have a billable hour rate that we charge up front. We only start charging that billable hour after 2 reviews. So what we would do here is we would start the review, make comments, send it back to the applicant. The applicant would address the comments and send it back in. That would be their 2 reviews. At the point that they have to do a 3rd review, the city engineer could make the determination that the changes that are still needed are significant and he would require a deposit. And with that deposit, it would be offset by the hourly rate we would keep track of doing that 3rd review. We had a development called Gary Oaks Development in town that went through reviews for many, many years, many subsequent reviews. Perhaps the engineering wasn't great on that particular project, so we found that we had a lot of possible billable hours, but we couldn't collect the money. So this deposit would mainly make sure that we're able to collect the money up front, at least a deposit on it, and then go forward. If somebody only spent, let's say we established a deposit of $5,000 and somebody only spent $3,000, we would refund the $2,000. I mean, we would certainly make them whole. If they had a $5,000 deposit and they went on to have billable hours of $15,000, we would we'd collect that money from the developer before we would issue the final plat drawings. And so this is a fairly rare circumstance that happens where people don't deliver on what they should be doing as an engineer. But it does happen, and we find ourselves being out quite a bit of money. So this deposit basically will help secure that. Now, the deposit we haven't set up, it would come back later as part of a master fee schedule change, and we'll establish that amount based on what the city engineer needs to see, and then that will finish the process. So what this would do is create the ordinance language that will allow this to happen, and then the master fee schedule will be the tool that will establish the deposit. So the next portion of the code is a time extension. Currently, the code allows you to go 5 years on your preliminary plat until you get to your final plat. In our code, it currently allows you to get a 1-year extension. If you're moving along, maybe you have problems with your development, maybe you can't get something engineered or something happens. Currently in the code, we allow a 1-year extension. You can also bond for those improvements too, if you want. Now, what we're proposing is to add a second year to the extension. So we think if 1-year extension is not quite enough, maybe we'll just build it with 2 years. And it's a fairly common process that's done in other places. The state allows us to provide extensions as long as we want. It's really up to us. So typically 1 or 2 years is a normal process. So we just thought it'd be reasonable to go ahead and build it in now, so that if there's ever a slowdown in the economy and a developer needs an extra year, then it's already built in. We don't have to wait and try and come back and change the code so we can have an extra year. So this is just more of an insurance policy. The third part we'd like to talk to you about tonight is a digital version of our code. Currently, our code requires a Mylar drawing, which is an old school way of doing business. It's worked well for many, many years, and it's still an option for people to do, but our code requires it. Our code does not really give the route to use a digital submittal of a set of plans. And the world's changed a lot in the last few years, where now we're accepting all of our plans via digital format. So we believe we should create that option in our code so that people have the ability to submit their digital documents to us to review. Once it's approved, it moves on straight to the county recorder and can be recorded. I did find one extra section in my attachments that I failed to see. I found it today. So there's another section of code I want to come back to you next time with, and that's section 21.30.020 construction plans. And it has another section in here that talks about Mylars. So we'll want to adjust that slightly. It already allows you a digital submittal in that particular section, so we just want to clean that language up a little bit. And so what we're trying to do really here is just clean things up and make things more modern for today's world. The next steps we'd like to do is come back in a council workshop on November 29th. The PC hearing would be on December 12th, and then city council hearing on January 16th. So that's our game plan. If you have any questions or comments, please go ahead.
Any questions? Yes, Commissioner Chase.
Couple things. All in favor of collecting fees ahead of time for third. I saw that there's a provision in there to be able to use a third party as well for engineering studies. Is there any protection for the builders that third party will be equal to or less than what the fee schedule is for in-house? Or will the builder be apprised ahead of time? I mean, what I'm saying is if our building department gets so busy, engineering department gets so busy, and we decide to third party it out, okay, this builder who gets third partied out, the protection's gotta be is that person's not gonna get billed at a higher rate than other builders in the city using in-house. Is there any protections in that for them?
It's a good question, Commissioner. We went through a series of years here at the city where we were short engineers, so we used engineering firms to help do the reviews for us. And we do accounting to make sure that what they're billing us for is accurate, and that's done by our engineering department. So they'll double check the bill that they get from the third-party engineering company and make sure that it's accurate within normal engineering standards. So we do review that information. What this language will do is it clarifies that we can use a third-party reviewer to actually charge for engineering services. That wasn't totally clear in the language, and so we wanted to make sure it was clear that we can use a third-party firm to do this kind of work.
Right. So for lack of better knowledge, if we charge for Ray's services of $50 an hour, just making things up right now, and Ray's busy, and this other builder needs his engineering study done, and we send it out, and this engineering firm charges $125 an hour, where's the parity? Why one builder gets Ray for $50 an hour and another builder gets, and I'm just seeing if there's a difference. I don't know personally if there is a difference between what we call billable hours and what our rate would be versus what an external engineering firm would be charging the city back. Is there pretty close parity to it, or is there?
I don't really know if there's really close parity. I know that private firms are more expensive generally than what we would bill out at our hourly rate. I think that you'll probably find, though, when it all works out in the wash, the total amount would be about the same as what we would charge.
Okay.
I can confirm that with our city engineer to see, if there's anything that he particularly looks at when he's checking the work of a third-party firm and what they're doing to do plan review.
Not a problem. The other thing is there a cost associated with us accepting Mylar versus digital? Is there additional costs, like equipment costs? Is there a processing cost of accepting Mylar? The question I have is, would it be better for us just to require all digital submissions and not give them either or choice between Mylar or digital? Is there a cost associated with that or no?
I don't know exactly what the recording costs are when you go down with a Mylar to have it recorded. I would think digital would be fairly easy to do.
Right.
There's probably a processing amount that the county assesses us, but I'm not sure what that is.
Just curious. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Cool, I had just a question about the deposits. Is the city incurring any administrative burden for example, are the developers able to make a request to see the accounting of what's been deducted from their deposit, or how does doing that ahead of time, is that causing an administrative burden? Is it releasing one on the other end of having to go try to collect money, or what's the kind of trade-off?
Another good question. Thank you. We aren't currently doing this yet, so that'll be good questions for us to ask. One thing I've thought about a lot is making sure we have good accounting set up so that the deposits that are paid are easily to track and make sure that we can do just what you suggested and track it so that we can figure out what's still owed from an engineering standpoint and how much has been paid. I think the city engineer is the person who generally calculates all that at the end of the process when the final documents are ready to be recorded. So that would be the final check and balance, where he would check the exact hours that have been spent working on a project. But that is one concern that I had, setting up a new account to make sure that we track these deposits.
So if I'm a developer, and maybe I'm a little bit smaller developer, so I'm really worried about costs, is there a mechanism by which I'd be able to request from the city what remains on my balance, or how much, before we get to the end, right? So if I made the $5,000 deposit, I know there's been some engineering work done, I want to know, do I have 3,000 left in my account? Am I completely spent? Is there a mechanism, or do you foresee us creating some method for them to have that access, and will that create, I imagine that will create some type of administrative burden that we have to address?
Good question again. Yes, I think we'll have to track the deposits and how much has been worked off on it. The Eden software is one we currently use for our financial work. And we're currently going through a whole new process called ERP, which is going to completely do all of our financial software in the city. And that'll be starting up next year and probably going throughout all of next year to put that together. Our finance department is doing that. I think for now, in the short run, it's a simple matter of setting up an account and tracking it based on whatever inputs are put into the hourly rate, as well as the hours that are put into the account. So I don't think that this will be a heavily used process, mainly because the quality of the engineering is normally pretty good, and you can usually get through in a couple of reviews. But it's just the result of some challenging engineering we had before that has caused us to want to put this in place so we don't get burned again.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? All right, well then, thank you, Mr. Cool, for your presentation and for answering our questions. With that, we'll close the public hearing. That's the end of our... With that, we'll close the public hearing and the end of our discussion items, and we will move to member comments. Yes, Commissioner Chazo.
Mr. Cool, the county recently had I'm going to use the word charrette again, with builders to get their concerns or suggestions on what they can change from a county standpoint. Was our building department invited to that meeting to hear their comments? And is there any plans for us to do the same here in the city?
Our building department was not made aware of it. We read about it online like most people did. I think the county has a significantly different situation than what Oak Harbor has. The county does a lot of single-family home permits and has had a challenge with staffing, significant challenges with staffing. And so they haven't been able to keep up with the demand for building review services. Here in Oak Harbor, we don't have that problem. Our turnaround time is really quick. We're staffed up, professionals, and we just don't have the need really to worry about short-term turnaround on building review or those kinds of issues. Certainly, we'd be interested in meeting with the development community and talking about any issues that they might have, and so that's certainly something we could advance in the future. I think the City Council's workshop coming up, I think in March, is when they have their retreat, and they'll set their goals for the future, and maybe that would be a logical place if there's a desire out there in the community to do some kind of review and bring the builders in or the developers and get their input. I mean, certainly that would be valuable. So, good idea.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, well, for my comments, I guess I want to kind of get everybody's feedback here on getting on the agenda for next Planning Commission meeting are the votes for chair and vice chair, so that we could vote that in December to take effect in January. I know we had talked previously about scheduling those and getting the chair back on a calendar route. So I asked Sarah to print me out the list of everybody's terms. You should have that in front of you. You know, there's some here that are due to end in 2024, myself included. So when we go to do the votes, Sarah, how would you like to have nominations beforehand or do the nominations at the meeting? What do you think is?
I think everything should be done in the open public meeting setting. So the discussion, nominations, and all discussion votes should happen here in the meeting setting.
So we will take your time, think about your nominations for are we all in agreement so that that should take place at the next meeting and we should have that on the next agenda?
Well, except if we're actually changing the terms, which sounds like it could come up before January, do we really need to change anything? I mean, do we need to start over again? I don't think we do in December.
I don't believe we're going to change, I don't think it'll be changed before January, because it'll have to come back before us.
Okay.
And then it'll go to the council for, I believe, the changes to the bylaws. We would have to approve them here first before they go to the council. Is that true, Dave? Maybe?
Yeah, I think from here, Sabrina's just going to take your comments and then run them up to council. And so I think they are scheduled to hear them later in December.
So they are scheduled for possible approval in December?
Right.
Because there are some people on here that may get, I don't see an issue with anybody not getting renewed, but if they change this from a 3-year term to a 2-year term, there's some people that'll come up almost immediately for renewal. So that's just if they change it.
I think it starts over completely from scratch.
Oh, so we would all,
That's not the way I read it.
Yes, so yesterday in the Marine Advisory Commission, we went over the bylaws, had some of the exact same questions, and that was one of them that came up was the terms. And the way they explained it to us yesterday, that was when it was ratified in January. Make sure your microphone's on. Sorry about that. Yeah, I was helping you and I forgot. So the way it was explained to me is like if that got ratified in January, they just reset everybody to those terms. So you may not, like your term may go beyond
Which means Andy would go to
January
the end of
of,
2026, not 2024.
right. So to keep it clean, I do believe that Commissioner Plumlee's suggestion is correct, because if we wait till the January meeting, technically we wouldn't have a chair or a vice chair. So if we re-elect them in December, the chair and vice chair, I didn't mean to suggest re-elect, okay, elect, sorry. My apologies. That way we at least go into January with elected chair and vice chair. So I do agree with that. And then and let the chips fall where they may if terms change. But they're only good for 1 year, right? Every year we have to do a chair and a vice chair, no matter what. Yes, it's part of our bylaws.
So Sarah, do we need to do a motion to have that on the agenda or can we add that to the next agenda?
No motion required.
Okay, so we'll vote for the 2024 chair and vice chair at our December 14th meeting, December 12th meeting, which is our next meeting. So please think of your nominations before then, and certainly if you want to nominate yourself, then please do that. Don't be shy. And we'll hold the votes, and then the new chair and vice chair will take effect at the January meeting, which we don't have a date for yet, I don't believe, correct? So, but we'll know that at the December meeting. What about travel coming into December, holiday months? Is there any commissioner that perceives they won't be here for the December 12th meeting by either virtually or in person? Just want to make sure that we do everything we can to have all the commissioners present because we are having the vote. I haven't, do you know if, have you heard anything from Commissioner Beadle or from Bronson?
I've not received any notices that anyone won't be able to attend a December meeting, but I'll be sure that the communications that go out prior to the meeting highlight that there will be discussion about voting in a new chair and vice chair for the 2024 year.
Thank you, I appreciate that. That's really, oh, yes, go ahead.
So just so we know, are you two interested in being chair and vice chair as you are now? Just to know ahead of time.
I'm interested, sure. I feel like I've, haven't given the seat enough reverence with only 2 months in the position. So, you know, since I will be on the commission, at least for the foreseeable future, yes.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
So that's pretty much all the comments I had. Were there any other comments or questions? If not, I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.